Hey everyone, it's Isaya. Welcome. Just give me a minute to get rid of this thing that we don't need anymore. Welcome. It's Isaya. And as I was saying, this is another episode of Things Women Don't Talk About, the specific series in my podcast where I discuss with a guest around topics seldom talked about. So it might be because they are chain. I did have a conversation about bathrooms once. Or it might be because they are too serious, or they are too taboo, or they are just simply one of those things that happen, don't discuss it. Tonight's topic is exactly this kind of topic. So, first of all, I'm going to introduce a little bit my guest. So, I'm not very good at pretending I'm not reading. So, you just guessed it. I'm going to read her bio because that's the easiest way to get to know her a little bit. So, my guest is Sonia Weyers. Welcome.
Thank you, Isaiah.
And she's the author of Happiness Now, a guided journey, and of another book called The Sundown, The Sundown of Life. She has explored numerous paths of quest for meaning in her own life. After successfully finding meaning, great for you, I'm so excited, and helping others do the same as a trained Gestalt-therapist, she faced the difficult situation of caring for her parents at the end of their life. Now she desires to give others a message of hope that there is more possibility for happiness, even in some dire situations. While many may admire her degrees, they pale in comparison to her success in learning to love the life she has. When she is not working, she enjoys her workouts, singing in a choir or two. Oh, just like me, learning new ways to live more sustainably and spending time with her 4 children and loved ones. And from what I've just learned, a few grandchildren also. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, the topic that we are dealing with tonight is exactly the one that you treated in your book. So, it's about embracing the end of life of others. And the idea, I think, is to allow or give ourselves permission to remain open to whatever might happen in these moments. And I think it belongs really very much in this podcast or in this series of the podcast, because it's one of those things that, as a 50-something woman myself, there's so many people around me that are going through this with their loved ones, and it's so seldom discussed. It's just one of those things. We do it because, there's this age in life when people get married and all your friends get married. Then there's this age in life where all your friends have children and you have children. And then at some point in life, there's this age where so many of us have to accompany our loved ones towards death, and it's not discussed. So how did you decide to discuss it? How and why did you decide to discuss it?
Well, it really happened organically because my parents declined, like many people. My mom had a cognitive decline, which was going kind of slowly. And then there was a bit of treatment that gave us a lull. And then it was just kind of taking its time. And so there was no big change. But then my dad had a aneurysm, which is like a bubble on his aorta, like you can have on a bicycle tire. And that required surgery. So I went to be with my mom. And when my dad came out of surgery, I naturally wrote to his siblings that everything had gone as planned. Now, my mom had not really gone as planned. So that's, the subtext of the story starts there, because she was panicked that he wasn't there and that I was there in his place. And she was pretty pissed at me, actually. I'll slip in there that it's only because of the benefit of all my good personal work that I didn't take that personally, that I understood that it was her illness, that it was not really about me. So just throwing that in there. But then my dad had another surgery and another. And so and each time my dad left, my mom declined. And so this just, natural wanting to let people know who cared who loved my parents and cared. I let first my dad's siblings, and then my mom's brother, and then a few close friends. And then as things continued to unravel, it was more and more friends. And at some point I included my own friends because I had kind of disappeared from the planet as far as they were concerned. And so I thought I'd let them know what I was up to. And it's through writing these emails, just to stay connected with folks and keep them abreast, that I got a couple of pieces of feedback of how helpful these emails had been. One friend told me,
beautiful.
Yeah, one friend told me that the emails I wrote changed her relationship with her parents, who had been dead for more than 10 years. And that's when I thought, oh my God, like I need to write this up.
Yeah.
So that's the answer to how I decided to write the book.
But it is beautiful because it's a journey. This moment that we know, and indeed the fact that you did afterwards, you didn't kind of reflection book. It's also a during, and that you were gifting yourself the possibility also during is amazing. Because for me, I didn't have that opportunity. My father died very, very 3 days. They told us the Monday and the Friday. So it was like no time. But that I was in shape. It's a whole nother story. But I was in no shape to be outside of able to write around it. And I think the fact that you took this time must also have been quite a you to be able to and reflect upon that as you were on this path.
Yes, it wasn't, like I said, it started with just wanting to let my dad's siblings know, and it evolved into a real exchange. Like people were really grateful for the news they were getting, because otherwise, how do you know? Like sometimes, one day you hear somebody died and you don't know what happened. But it also gave back, which was not something I'd consciously intended. But I got a lot of supportive responses, and people really appreciated the way I wrote and the events. And so it was also therapeutic for me to put it into words. And also because because I'm bilingual and my parents had friends in French and in English. So I actually wrote 2 emails. And so I ended up writing this book also in 2 languages. But so it was really it really helped me to process as I was going along to actually write it somehow, even though that was not my conscious intention.
By the way, just let me just mention anyone who said that you want the title, if you want to have a look at it, in the description of this video or podcast, wherever you're watching or listening, and you can find it on Amazon. A Town of Life. It's so fun that I get to discuss with another bilingual person. I feel like let's be posh about this and have the nice French accent, that all the English. So, how did you live through that? It's what we're, if we're things we don't talk about.
Well,
how was it?
Yeah, exactly. So at the beginning, the first surgery, my parents were doing fine. My mom was declining, but things were pretty much continuing as usual at that point. And the first surgery, it was my job to go. I'm an only child. I felt it was my role. I had no, resentment whatsoever. I just went because it was for me to go, with my little, well, it was more my car, but it felt like I went with my little bag on my, on my shoulder. And I went very optimistically. And then things just kind of crashed the first night. Like I was not at all the relief that I thought I would be for my mom, right? I thought I was going to be with my mom who couldn't be alone. And it started with a big crash. Like, the 6th or 7th time I helped her back to bed when she had woken up screaming, and she told me, "Tu peux retourner en France, you can return to France." My parents lived in Belgium, I lived in France. So that's where she was like she didn't want me there. I was like, okay, I can't go to France, but I can go upstairs maybe, watch from upstairs. And so that was like the first rude awakening. It was like, okay, I was there to save the situation, and my presence was making the situation worse. um, so that was like a
Humbling.
story. Say what?
Humbling.
I didn't hear. Humbling. Well, humbling, but
Yeah.
extremely shocking also.
I'm guessing.
Extremely shocking. And then, then I knew it wasn't going to be easy. And then for each thing, it became crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis. So I, just responded to the crisis, and I organized my life. And oftentimes I cried for like the middle 100 kilometers between my house and theirs. Just cried and cried. It was just also processing, right? Just the tension, just the tension of not knowing what
go back
happen.
and forth, or did you stay there? Did you go back and forth?
No, I went back and forth. No. I had a couple of kids at home still, teenagers. So with their dad and I are separated, and so he was very, he made himself flexible. Like if I had to go, he would like take our daughter. Sometimes our son was around. He made some arrangements as well. That was helpful, but no, I had to come home and be a mom and see my clients, and so it's a 4 or 5 hour drive. Exactly. Well, for a weekend, yes, but for 2 years, no. So, the first half of 2018, I completed 10 round trips between my house and theirs, from one crisis to the next. And the 10th round trip, I brought them to a retirement home near me. That had been a discussion, right? My dad first thought that they were going to continue the activities of their life, and therefore it'd be better to have a retirement home near them. But he finally came to the realization that was not going to happen, that my mom could not go to the concerts they used to go to, the restaurant with the friends. And so he decided, being close to me, and also that my kids would always come and see me. And so being close to me would allow them to see the grandkids. So how was it for me? Back to your question. It was all the same, all at once, sometimes overwhelming, sometimes empowering. Like I really felt like I rose to the situation, right? I really just mobilized all my strength, all my competence, everything to be the woman of the situation. And sometimes, it was too much. Like it was just too much. But what do you do when it's too much and you can't stop? It's too much, but you got to keep going. So there was some of that too, and that came back to bite me later. But so that's a bit of how it was for me. No surprise, right?
Different.
I didn't understand.
Sorry. I hope. Hear me now.
I hear you now. Try.
To be really, we're having a storm. The connection.
Oh dear. I'm alone. I assume she's going to come back, but I can keep talking, I guess, about the experiences. So the reason I was interested in discussing this with Isaya tonight is that I've come to the realization that people really don't discuss this. Oh, I thought I could contribute to your audience. You're back? Yeah. I was just saying Yeah.
I'll cut my camera because that will help. So just
Okay. Did you want to ask me a question, or should I keep talking? I guess I'll keep telling you why I was interested in talking with Isaya on her podcast is because I've come to realize that people really don't discuss this, that it's pretty taboo, and yet everybody has parents, right? And sometimes they die when we're younger. That can happen too. But most people face the end of life of their parents, and that can be complicated by a number of things. So one of the things that can really complicate that period is if you have unresolved issues with your parents.
I'm guessing. That makes sense. Sorry, the bandwidth craziness. I think I'm back.
I get
If
it.
I'm not, I'm just going to cut my camera because this is mostly an audio podcast. But I think that it my best. But yeah, I'm guessing that
Yes.
it's a very beautiful period to have all the unresolved shit emerge, kind of, because you I'm guessing again, maybe you just correct me if I'm wrong, but that there is this knowledge that it is the last part of the relationship of the as they're alive relationship between you and your loved ones. So you know that you're kind of it's the last stretch. So if you've got unresolved things, that's when they emerge. You can't ignore them anymore. Think, oh, I'll deal with that later, because there might be no later.
Exactly. Well, that tends to bite people more after people pass away, that it's like, okay, so now I'm stuck with my things. I can't project them on them, or I can't make them responsible, and I certainly can't go to them to fix it. But what I mean by the difficulties is that I do hear people sometimes say, oh, well, my mom, she didn't do this and that for me, I'm not going to take care of her. And that's not without consequence, right? I mean, that you can try to convince yourself that that's going to be okay, that you can live in that resentment and that's going to justify. Certainly I get it, right? People feel like they've been wronged and they don't want to turn the other cheek. I get it. But it's not without consequence.
Yeah, I'm guessing. I remember a friend of mine when I was very young. He was kind of older than I was at the time. He must have been something like 50, and I must have been 20. And he was saying, I decided not to speak to my family, but I did it knowing the amount of consequences that meant. It's one of those things that you don't like breaking up with a friend or even a girlfriend. I suppose it's the same with your parents or your loved ones, even if they're not your parents, when you know that they are going towards the end, they're deciding not to participate, not to be there, is also a price to pay, I'm guessing.
I think so. I mean, I don't have that experience, obviously, but that's certainly my belief. And so what I, the message I try to give also with my story is that, because I had for a long, long time a very difficult relationship with my mother. I didn't feel like she loved me. Now I understood later she loved me, the way she could. And so I had a lot of resentment towards her when I was younger, but I went through a long, 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 long therapy. And really made peace with it. And, okay, she's my mom. She did the best she could. It was, definitely not good enough for me, but I made my peace with it. And I found, nourishment or whatever, or love elsewhere.
And is there a, because what you're describing is a long period of time also. So that means that there is a part of one's self that has to get into this. Yeah, it's a road. It's not like an event. It's life that is now defined partly by this happening. Was there an evolution in the way you felt, in the way you interact? Or did you, is there a kind of I think that's what I was going to when we broke off. I was thinking, is there a grief thing that is already in place? Or, is there an evolution in your, or was there for you? I mean, not in general, because I don't care about generalities, but I'm interested in how you lived that and through that.
Yeah, I kind of took the option, I took a turn and I decided that I was gonna, or I didn't consciously decide that, but I really chose a path where I was gonna hope for a better tomorrow, always. Like it was always possible later that tomorrow, not later, tomorrow could always be better. And so in that way, but at the same time, I remained not delusional, right? It wasn't like tomorrow's going to be better, it's okay. No, it was like difficult, but tomorrow might be better. That gave me some courage, and also I stayed present with whatever was going on, because what else was I going to do? And so that pattern kind of remained. Now, my mom declined more and more. My dad had surgery 7 or 8 or 9. I can't remember now. It's in the book. General anesthesias. And each time my mom declined. They came to a retirement home. My mom declined even more, leaving their environment for people who have cognitive decline is a disaster. But it was unavoidable. Like, my dad needed help after all his surgeries, and my mom started being violent with the help. And so that there was no other option. They had to, and my dad wanted to stay with my mom, so they had to go somewhere together. And then so this was 2018, like it started in January. and June, we relocated. December 22nd, my mom passed away. She choked. And she passed away. And I was actually away at that time. Like, I'd gone to spend Christmas with my daughter, who was in Africa at the time. So that was a bit of a like, okay, so I can't actually take any time off. That thought crossed my mind.
Yeah.
But if I can share a story that is really dear to my heart, about 2 weeks before my mom died, because she had had a first near miss in November, right after I finished emptying their house. I was like, now this, wow. I really thought when they came to the retirement home, I kept thinking that things would be better, right? But they kept not being. I mean, I laugh now about it, but I'm amused at my, I was going to say my naivety,
I think it's human.
Also,
I think it's human that we can't go on living life in a situation permanently, and you.
Yes, and it really actually helped me, to be upbeat, to remain upbeat and to remain courageous. And but so I come back from emptying the house. My mom, almost chokes to death. I was like, okay, I was going to do this thing. I was going to do it later. But anyway, so I didn't want to feed them, or I didn't want to invite them over for meals, because I was afraid she would choke. But I figured I could invite them for tea in the afternoon, because they were 2 miles from my house, not even. And so that my parents came. It's early December, and my dad is really, a bit depressed, because my mom hasn't spoken a word for about 2 weeks. She's just kind of closing in on herself. And, I'm making tea and I'm talking to her, like, because she's there, I'm like, okay, would you like some tea? Would, more? You'd like sugar or milk, or I don't know what, I'm talking to her. And my dad shushed me, and he's like, why are you talking to her? She's not going to answer anyway. And I'm like, Dad, I'm not talking to her for her to answer me. I'm just talking to her because she's there. Like, and my mom actually answered me, not once, not twice, but actually 4 times now. It was very simple answers. It was yes, no, a bit, and more, or something like that. But there was interaction. So she hadn't spoken for 2 weeks. And because I remained open to the possibility that she might speak, right? If she didn't speak, it was fine, but I didn't want to close that door. And then I sat down across the table from her, and she was looking at me like a little bit like this. And I just intuitively, I lifted my glasses and she smiled at me. And my dad was moved to tears.
That's beautiful.
And so, that's in the face of all the difficulties, like really for me, like keeping an open mind to what was possible. And a lot of what I considered possible ended up not happening, but just having an outlook of possibility, like for example, with my mom not speaking and, speaking to her anyway. Well, if I'd listened to my dad, right, I would have stopped speaking to her and we wouldn't have shared that beautiful moment, because that was the last time my mom came to my house. The following weekend, I don't know, I was busy and then I left. And then when I came back, I organized her funeral. So
yeah, so I love this idea that, we have to be open to the possibilities, even in the face of yes, we're going downwards, but there might be sublime moments in there.
Exactly.
And thank you for reminding us of that, because there's this doom and gloom situation going on in the backgrounds almost, but in the meantime, and I don't have the experience with my parents, but I did. My grandmother was ill for a very long time, and she kind of declined very slowly, and most of the time for the last 2 years that I saw her, that she was alive, she did not rest. She was just in her own world, completely lost in. And then suddenly she had flashes of knowing who she was talking to, and the fact that we kept talking to her and we kept including her in whatever conversation was there. And sometimes she was absolutely crazy, like completely out of it, with dementia. And some other times she was there with us for 5 minutes. And those 5 minutes, my son, who was actually, that's get me emotional. My son, who was actually 5, remembers that. Because we did not consider that she was unattainable. We talked to her, we kept her in the loop, basically. And so my son remembers her as a person. Otherwise, she would just have been kind of part of the furniture for him. A 5-year-old, if there's an old lady there not speaking to anyone, just sitting on her chair, she would never have existed for him. And so I think it's amazing.
Beautiful.
And she got to know him even for 5 minutes. Oh, emotional. I've been crying all day. I've been having very emotional conversation today. Sorry.
Well, that's also the beauty, right? So that's important. I mean, it's both beautiful what you're sharing, but it also what's happening right now with you is also important. So the other thing that I can share is that what I did do, to the extent that I could, I felt I didn't shy away from feeling the emotions, and that really helped. Now, when you asked if there was a grief going on, I had ideas about how that might be the case, but the grief, when the grief came, I was also very close to my dad, always, like as much as things were difficult with my mom. I had a very close relationship with my dad, and also he died 9 months after she did. He had a cancer that they removed everything. And she died in December. In January, he had a clear scan, so they thought they got everything. In May, he had a nodule on his liver. In August, he had metastases all over, and he died September 29th. So he died of a broken heart at the hands of a few cancer cells that were hanging out, right?
Yeah.
So that was pretty poignant as well. But so the emotions and then the grief, but the grief came, I don't know, about 6 months later, really kind of set in for about 9 months. Like it kind of played with COVID a little bit. So
we have that also.
And so that was also like, there were also a lot of people who wanted to, who were suggesting different things to essentially distract me from it all. And I just kind of, in my heart of hearts, for me anyway, right? I'm not, I never want to tell people what they need to do or what, but for me, what I can share that really worked is that the quickest and healthiest way out was through, right? To just dive into the experience and And one day, about 9 months later, I woke up and I was like, I feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
And so a
Exactly.
lot of
But there
people
is,
struggle
I
with their
agree,
emotions and they don't want to feel them, and that just kind of prolongs.
prolongs the thing. Yeah, I would agree absolutely that, getting through the thing that you have to face, and the only way is through. And it not only is it faster, but also it's more effective, basically, because you don't live with all this repressed stuff in your life.
Which can have
But
physical implications as well, right? I mean,
of course, it will. But before they died, this is, for me, it's the most interesting part, is how did you decide to live? So basically, did you what did you give up, or did you not give up? Did you keep on going to choir practice? Did you, all those things, or did you kind of
there's a time.
suspend yourself? Kind of.
I kept doing what I could. Like when I was home, I would engage in my regular activities, but when I had to go, I had to go. And I remember one time I had to go, but I actually went to choir, which is on Wednesday nights. I went to choir with my suitcase in the trunk. I went and did my thing, and then I came back to choir with my suitcase on the way back, still in my trunk. So I had a trip that was between two choirs. So it was also because it's also the things that are life-giving for me, right?
Yeah.
Like singing for me, right? As for some people, it might be gardening, reading, whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing that is life-giving for you, that is supportive and that energizes you, it's important to keep some of that, at least. If you stop everything that supports you, then
and you put yourself in this bubble of death, basically, and or drama and death. I think it's and you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned that online already, or did you mention that before, that you were an only child? So on top of that, you got this. It has to be you. You can't just say, "Oh, some other sibling can relieve me from the," "Oh, that my brother can do that." And I feel I'm an only child too, so.
Yeah, I was feeling a little bit lonely with it all, but then I started hearing people with, similar situation or other in their families, and then all the complications that happen between siblings when the parents decline. And I was like, okay, it's all on me, but at least the only person I have to agree with is myself.
Yeah,
so
and you don't have to fight anyone over any decisions. I get you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what if somebody says, no, they need to, come to a retirement home near me? No, it's near me, or no, they should stay close to where they live, or, whatever. And and people might have, they're all very good reasons to feel the way they feel, but when they disagree, and also when there's several siblings, sometimes there's one who does a lot more than the others, and then that one might feel resentment, but the others might.
Yeah,
feel
I'm guessing
well.
there are this would also trigger so many things unresolved among siblings. We don't have experience for that, neither you nor I, but I'm pretty sure I can guess that this would trigger a lot of, again, everything unresolved will kind of appear on the surface, and whether it gets resolved or whether we just fight about it for the duration of that. But what I meant to say, talking about the siblings, is that since you were the only person in there, it also meant that you had to take care of your own energy and your own joy, basically, because you were not dying.
No, I definitely was not.
And that's a good thing to remember, I think, and
Absolutely.
because if it lasts a long time, and it did for you, like, we're not talking, for me, as I was saying, my father died in 3 days, so there was no way we could have prepped anything or be ready, of course, but at the same time we were kind of spared the decline and everything. But if the decline lasts a long time, and the energy that you have to put in there lasts a long time, then I think it's very important to remember how much you need to take care of yourself first, because otherwise you won't last the distance, basically.
No, exactly. And one thing that was important for that is to really have the courage to ask for support. Because I had aunts, cousins, friends in Belgium, people who could, go be with my parents while I took the time to kind of organize suspending my life for a few days, pack a bag, and do my 5-hour travel. So, my aunt did that a couple of times. And it's also, people, I mean, sometimes people don't want to ask because they don't want to burden people, but it's also sometimes is an honor for people to be asked and to have the opportunity to help, to participate. So, I had one cousin who brought some groceries one time, another cousin who came and took my mom and her caretaker to go see my dad when I'd been there already 8 days and I needed to go home, but he came home later than, his return or home was delayed because of whatever happened. So yeah, daring to ask for support. What's the worst that's going to happen is either people are going to say no, and then you can ask someone else, or you can or people are going to say yes, but they're going to feel like they have to, or they're going to say yes, which is not a real yes. Well, that's on them.
That's on them.
Exactly.
That's on them. That's a them problem.
That's on.
Learn to say your yeses and your no, people. This is not on me.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think. And I think what you were saying about how you started writing, which is literally the second thing you said: ask for help, dare to ask for help, but also talk to people. So don't leave it in the dark. Don't go through that alone. So whether it's just for the help or whether it's just to talk about it, and again, the things women don't talk about. It's one of those things. Again, if the least we talk about, the less we talk about it, the more difficult it gets. So, because people will, as you were saying, ask more questions, support you more if you share. If you just go through it alone in the darkness, it can be very, very lonesome, I'm guessing.
Yes, and that's what yes, absolutely. And I had my small network of support people for me, who I could talk to, and a good friend, my partner, and my kids also. Sometimes my kids came with me, but the kids who weren't there, they wanted some spoken words about it and all that. But what I noticed recently, that this past summer, I was at a gathering in my village, social gathering with music and whatever. And my book had just come out in French, and I live in France, right? So somebody asked me about it, and then I started talking about it. And this whole table of 6 or 8 people were having their own conversations, right? But as we started exchanging a little bit about my book, and she asked me why or something, I mean, I was talking about it, people just kind of gathered and joined the conversation, and everyone shared an experience with a loved one who had, some sort of decline or pass away, and it was just really a blessed moment of sharing about something that is normally behind closed doors, right? Yeah. And so if there's something I want for this book, is that it will get people, get it out of people a little bit more, for maybe first an interaction with the book, but then to not be afraid. Like it's really a universal experience. And
yeah, it's weird, because we humans, we will sit at a table and talk about our babies when they're just born, 6 months baby. Every mother will, and when did he walk, and what, with the teeth, and we, all the gory details, including the gory ones, right? But then at the other end of life, we kind of pull a nice curtain and say, this didn't happen, or
at least
and
this we don't talk
alone.
about.
Yeah. And we don't talk about to extend to people, to just through the book, and maybe then to their loved ones or to their friends, kind of start talking about it, because, well, death is part of life, basically. And with the medical accompaniment, there is a lot of people who will live very old and will decline at some point. Not in the Middle Ages where people died 45 of half the.
Yeah, that what you're saying reminds me. Yeah, what you're saying about the medical care, it reminds me of something. Also, an important role I played is to be a spokesperson for, was more my dad at that point after my mom passed away, but a spokesperson for in the face of the doctors, like asking questions, when he was
So
like a little
important.
out of it. And, I went to the medical appointments, I asked some questions, I wanted to understand. And if I didn't, if it didn't seem right, and that was really instrumental actually just before he died, because he was in a retirement home. And when his numbers, his last blood work was terrible. And I was waiting for the word from the oncologist, and he only spoke through the doctor who was at the retirement home. So this doctor came and said the oncologist suggests hospitalizing him in the next big city so that he can put an IV and control his pain. And I was like, am I allowed to oppose that? And he was like, oppose that? And I was like, yeah, it hurts him when people turn him to wash him. You want to put him in a stretcher, take him 3 floors down, put him in an ambulance, 30 minutes where it's going to be hard for me to go see him in an impersonal place. Yeah, I'd like to oppose that. And out of my protest, he actually spoke to my dad directly and asked him what he wanted. And my dad said, in no uncertain terms, I had to rephrase. I said, Dad, I think the doctor wants to know what you want. And he was like, I want to die as soon as possible. I'm like, okay, that's clear. And do you want to die here or do you want to die in the hospital? And he was like, I want to die here. And so that was said. The doctor heard him, but the most important is that I saw and heard that he heard it. And so after that, they did what they had to do so that he could stay in his bed, where
being
I
a spokesperson, you're right, because what happens is there's so much medical jargon and conversations and things happening, and even for people who are in face, it might be really difficult to just know and understand all of that. So yeah, and again, it means educate yourself, because you might need to get some information to be able to be that spokesperson. Is really it's a job, and it's a job that opens up for magical moments, as you were saying, and also for I think healing a lot of things that might have gone through in life. So yeah, I think it's really it should be part of around, what did you do those last 2 years? Well, I did that, when you have to fill your CV, and then people ask, what did you do? Well, this is part of what I did.
Seriously, yeah, that's what I did. Yes, what the magical moments that you mentioned, I like to call them the extraordinary moments of connection that become available if you really show up for what's what's actually going on.
Yeah, and again, it's a question I'm understanding of not shying up from the emotions and from the reality of the situation, which is the decline.
That's exactly
and the more we can face that and talk about, be okay with that, the more we open up for the extraordinary moments of connection.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that is a nice ending, isn't it, for our conversation? We've already talked almost 45 minutes, so we're good. So if you want to know more about Sonia, you will find her details around everywhere of this video or this podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, you can find her book on Amazon. The title, once again, in English, is The Sundown of Life. I love this now that I got the title. And even though it's backwards, it seems like a beautiful cover. If you are listening to the podcast, you will find the podcast huge. So, and if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love some comments and some love as per usual. Thank you very much. Do you have some final words for this podcast? Not final for your whole life, hopefully.
No. So I really encourage people, you listeners, I really encourage you to check, like, if you're, if you are available, if you're ready to catch these extraordinary moments of connection. I actually have an assessment, a free assessment that I can add, if you want, to the show notes for.
Oh, that's great. Yes, I love that. Are we
Yeah.
available? Yeah, that's very good.
Are you available? Are you ready? Or do you have blocks inside you that you can then work on? And, either you can work on them yourself because you know how to do that, or you can, seek help. I'm a Gestalt-therapist, like I said, but you can find help anywhere you like. And so I'll put that.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. If you can share that. Yeah, I will share that with the listeners. Absolutely. Thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me.
I hope for many more moments of extraordinary connection, whether with your loved ones, or however tiny or big, or young or old, because we can have moments of connections even when people are not declining. If we open up, maybe the opening for those moments is also a door to the other moments. Thank you very, very much, and thank you. I will not see you next month, because next month December, so we're taking a break, and I'll see you in January with another amazing guest. And I have a crazy program for 2024, but you'll have to wait for it. Bye for now.